Are you between the ages of 35 and 49? Have you been asking questions like, am I going through early menopause? Why is my cycle like this? My cycle has changed so much and my energy level has changed so much. Could this be menopause? If you are, you're not alone. Join me this week as I take a look at perimenopause and the power of pause and how that really does help to minimize some of the symptoms that you're experiencing.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an Eastern medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your menstrual health, offering period solutions for a symptom free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. This week, we're going to be tackling a topic that teaches us a lot and is touching a lot of lives right now. We are talking about perimenopause. So, what is perimenopause? Perimenopause is the transitional phase in a woman's life that happens prior to the menopausal transition starting. So, if you recall episode 14 in season 2, we talk about the body moving through 7-year cycles. So, for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to be focused for 35 to 49. Okay. 35, if you recall from that episode, is where we are starting to be invited to move through the world in a different way. We're no longer able to burn the candle at both ends. We are a little past the peak of our vitality. So, as that starts to happen, we start getting invited to think about our day to day in a little different way. So, if we continue to try and burn the candle at both ends the way that we did in our 20s and early 30s, by the time we reach this 35 transition, and remember, 35 is a benchmark, but you can be 2 years on either side before you start seeing any signs or symptoms of this. When we hit that transitional point, our body starts giving us very clear signs that it needs different things. So, 35 for me, I didn't really start noticing that transition until I was closer to 37, which does speak to the way that I have been caring for my body, which is really great. But when that transition occurred, I was like late 37, early 38. And I remember thinking, wow, I, what happened? I don't know why all of a sudden my stamina is different. And I really need to take more rest days than I used to before. And man, my 8 hours of sleep is super valuable. While all of those things are still important and valuable before that point, because 30% of our sex hormones are made in our adrenals, we are very susceptible to having hormone issues happen as a result of sleep deprivation. We need 1 to 2 hours more sleep than men do. Quality of sleep quality starts getting disturbed during this time frame. And if you don't get ahead of it, this is where a lot of sleep issues start happening for women. Either having difficulty falling asleep, but more commonly, it's having issues staying asleep. So, if you find yourself in this 35 to 49 window and you find yourself chuckling as you listen to this episode because 1 to 3 in the morning has started to become your arch nemesis, you are not alone. And it's actually very common during this time frame. So, why does this happen? So at 35, our chi naturally starts to decline. We are being invited by our body to start making mindful choices about how we choose to move through the world. So we have to begin balancing output with rest in a more intentional way. We have to be more mindful that we do need that 1 to 2 hours more sleep, and we need to get to bed a little bit earlier. I can tell you from scientific evidence as well as from personal experience, the quality of sleep that a person has between midnight and 8 AM is drastically different than somebody who goes to sleep between 9 and 10 and sleeps through until the morning. Going to bed earlier is going to serve that hormone restoration process in a more meaningful way. And I know that it's really hard because when you get into that age bracket, a lot of us have kids that just don't fricking want to go to bed. I don't know about anybody and that's listening, but I have teenagers that just don't go to bed and they're still bickering with each other and roughhousing in the hallway and stuff like that during that time frame when I'm trying to go to sleep. This is not uncommon for it to be a challenge for women who are in this age bracket, and I'm starting to see an astronomical number of women that are reaching out to me, and this is why I thought it was really important to do an episode specifically about perimenopause, because there's a whole generation that is hitting this transitional zone, and because we were of the generation where we were told we have to go to college and we have to work like men in order to be successful and go push, push. It's the only way that you're going to have your worth valued in this world and all of that. A lot of us are getting pretty close to 40 and going, dear God, what is going on with my body? Holy cow. I feel awful. I don't know what's happening. And they reach out to me, and the question is always, am I going through menopause early? If I had a nickel for every time I heard that question in the last few months, I would be a very rich woman because there are a huge number of women that are starting to hit this time frame in their life and their sleep is disrupted and their stamina isn't what it used to be and they're waking brain foggy and they feel yucky and I don't feel like I have the vitality and energy to do any of the things that I want right now, and that's really discouraging for them. It's discouraging for me, I get it, right? I wouldn't want my body calling the shots. My body used to call the shots. My body used to tell me where I could go. I used to know where every public restroom was because my cycle was out of control and it called all the shots. And I had to plan my life around it. Let me invite you to consider planning your life around your body in a more healthy way, a more intentional way. And if you find that you are 34 years old and you're listening to this, listen up, sister, because this is the information that is going to help you feel in your power later on in your life. If you are listening to this and you're like, "Oof, I'm 40, I'm already in it," or "I'm over 42, I'm already in it," that's okay. You have not passed the point of no return and cannot affect change here. All right. So the reason that we start seeing all of these symptoms start to creep up in perimenopause, which, by the way, if you remember from episode 14, is actually right around 42. So again, 2 years on either side, but I would say the large majority of women who are reaching out to me right now are about 40, meaning that they didn't take that invitation and start honoring it around 35. They kept trying to push, they kept trying to do too much, there was a lot of stress, they weren't living in a cyclical way, and this is not criticism to anyone. It's not criticism. It is a statement about our culture. It is a statement about the lack of education around women's bodies, and that lack of education is making us really fucking sick. It's making us really sick. And now that we have such a large number of women that are starting to hit this age zone, all of a sudden they're going, "Ah, I can't live like that. Please help because I have too many things to do." And that's actually part of the problem. We have too many things to do. Perimenopause is when the body starts naturally making the journey towards the menopausal transition. You are not actually going through the transition yet. All right. So, cycle related problems, symptoms, irregularities, all of those kinds of things, very common during the perimenopausal transition, but it speaks to the way we've cared for our bodies up until about 35 or up until about 40. Because when women ask me this question of, am I going through menopause early? It's because their symptoms have started to get really extreme as a result of lack of education and lack of intentional care around their cycle. So you would be amazed at how cramps can be reduced simply making a change to a menstrual cup. Simply making a change to a menstrual cup. You're no longer blocking the exit of the unused endometrial lining that your body is working to flush out and essentially create a clean slate to start trying to get you pregnant for the next month. And when you use a plug product like a tampon, you block the exit and it backs up into your reproductive organs. And you have all kinds of sludgy, gross stuff that comes out. A lot of times people will make comments of, I pull the tampon and I've got a big clot, clumpy, gross thing on the end of it. It's because the body is trying to flush what it's supposed to flush. And the tampon acts like a plug. Knowing this, you can get leak-free protection from a menstrual cup without all of the TSS risks because it's made with medical grade silicone in most cases. And this change alone in one cycle's time makes a night and day difference in how people experience pain. But we don't know this stuff because we're not taught this stuff. And it makes me absolutely bonkers. So for any of you who are listening and going, "Ooh, I don't know if I'm in perimenopause or if I'm going through early menopause or just what," here's what we're looking for. So, as a TCM practitioner, the way that we look at perimenopause is that you are beginning the journey in that transition to your non bleeding years. So, the sea of blood, the Chong Mai, is drying up. And as that happens, you do start seeing signs of dampness. This could be dryness, excuse me. Start seeing symptoms of dryness like dry lips, dry skin, dry hair, personal dryness, an increase in UTIs, BV, yeast infections, that type of thing. All of these things are common when women are starting to make this transition because your body is slowly starting to dry out. So if you look at little girls and that transition between 7 to 14, their bodies start changing and they look less like little girls and more like young women. And this is part of the transformation that is taking place in their body as their sea of blood begins to fill up. Okay. And the first period is supposed to be the chalice running over. We did talk about this in a previous episode, so I'm not going to focus on that as much. But the reason why I'm using this illustration is right now in perimenopause, you are reverse engineering that process. So the body is slowly starting to make that journey towards the non-bleeding years and the full transition that takes place. So sleep disruptions between 1 and 3 in the morning start becoming really common. I joke with my clients about half in, half out of the covers, where you are covered, but partially by the blankets, and you've got a leg and an arm, maybe half your body hanging out of the covers. And if your spouse puts the blanket up over your shoulder, you feel like you are being smothered and you're in fire because it's just way too warm and you want to smother them with a pillow. Anybody resonate with this? So we make jokes about stuff like this, right? But it's because as this yin begins to dry up, there isn't enough, and I'm going to use a kind of a biomechanical explanation, but there isn't enough coolant in the car to keep the car from overheating. So we need to put coolant in the car in another way. So this is going to be foods that support yin. This is going to be things like bone broth, goji berries, jujubes. These help to put and hold more moisture in your system. Yin supportive foods are going to take some of the edge off of the symptoms that you see in this transition, supporting the blood, supporting the yin during this time frame is very important to help reduce symptoms and decreasing liver qi stagnation, which oftentimes results from stress, will also help the expression of these symptoms because think about how teenagers can be mouthy and edgy and irritable, and one minute they're fine, and the next minute they're just think about teenagers and how one minute and the next minute they're yelling at you, the minute after that they're fine and then they're crying. So you think about all of that emotional spectrum that you see with teens. And the perimenopausal transition really isn't that different. It's very similar. We feel moody and we're fine one minute and then we're yelling at people to pick up their shoes the next minute and little things stress us out and you hear yourself saying things like, "Why am I the only person that is capable of picking this up?" These kinds of things start to increase in frequency the closer we get to menopause. Energetically, we're making a shift. Okay. We are as susceptible, if not more so, to liver qi stagnation in the perimenopausal phase as we are as teenagers. If you look at them side by side, and unfortunately for some of us, we're going through our transition while our kids are going through theirs, and it makes for a perfect storm, unfortunately. If we do things to manage our stress levels and be more intentional about how we're moving through the world, this is doing things in alignment with your cycle. This is holding yourself accountable for breaks. This is making sure you're getting certain foods in your body. If we move through our month in a more intentional way, in alignment with our cycle, we are going to see a huge change in the way that our bodies show up, our response to stress, and subsequently, how our periods show up. Because periods in the perimenopausal zone tend to just be wrought with problems. They start getting irregular. Your clots, all of a sudden, you've always historically had small clots, and all of a sudden they're huge and you don't know why. You might have had little murmurs of pain, and now all of a sudden it's painful and you don't know why, or you have blood bleeding and everything feels heavy in your pelvis. All those kinds of things essentially show that you have spent your energy in other places and you haven't been working in alignment with your cycle. And so now that you're at this transitional stage and there's less chi to go around, you're now starting to see these symptoms creep in because you're working less from a place of abundance and more from a place of what goes in must come out. There was an adage, and I might be misquoting it a little bit, but there's this understanding that the face before 40 is inherited and your face after 40 is your own, meaning that some of the energy that you have as a young person saves your bacon and allows for a little bit more flexibility in terms of your output and lack of self care. But then once you get to right around this perimenopausal transition, Your body goes, girl, there is not enough energy to go around. And if you want me to do this thing, you now need to give me rest to balance it out. Now, rest doesn't have to mean being sloth and sitting around all the time. This could be giving your brain a break and going for a nice leisurely walk. That's be great for your circulation. It's going to give your nervous system punctuation where you're not sitting at your desk, not moving, stressed out, really focused on an activity. You are giving your nervous system a break. The more you give yourself brain breaks, the more you give yourself bio breaks, the more you prioritize your self care, the more you prioritize working your life in a more cyclical way, in alignment with what your body needs in each of its phases and each season in nature, you're going to notice that your symptoms, just with those lifestyle changes, is going to start to regulate itself and it's going to become less symptomatic because our bodies always want to reach towards homeostasis. They want to be in right relationship. They don't want to feel like crap. They don't want to work in depletion. And so the more intentional we can be about our lifestyle choices during this, I'm going to say 40, okay, because it's 2 years ahead of that 7-year transition. So between 40 and 49, the better it's going to be when you actually start to make your transition. So the average age for making a menopausal transition in the United States is 51. We generally are saying as a TCM practitioners, 49 is that next benchmark. So it could be 2 years on either side. So I've seen some clients going through it in a healthy way at 48 and some that have been over 53 that are like, I'm reaching out to you because I'd like menopause to not suck once I get there, but I don't know if I'm starting that transition yet. And then in 2 calls, it's very apparent that they are now emotionally starting to make those transition choices, statements, things like that, because this isn't just a physical thing that's changing in your body. The way that you look at the world continues to change too. When we're in our reproductive years, we are very home and hearth focused. We are very family focused, family unit focused. We tend to put our careers on hold for babies. We tend to put a lot of things that we want in our lives on hold. Sometimes it's our weight loss journeys because we feel like we need to prioritize the kids. Whatever it is, there's a lot of things that we tend to deprive ourselves of and put on hold when our kids are younger. And then as we get into this perimenopausal zone, all of a sudden our body is starting to make big demands on us and saying, you must rest more. Please help me by resting more. Please help me by not living in this heightened state of stress all the time. Please help me by getting enough sleep. And the body starts really demanding it. And when we ignore it or we try to power through it, it just gets worse. So then by the time you are actually at your menopausal transition, you feel like a fire breathing dragon. Your hot flashes are just straight up out of control. And God knows we have plenty of memes about stuff like that. And we poke fun at how emotionally erratic and sensitive to fluctuations, we're going to call it, with hot flashes and things like that in our system. We have plenty of jokes about it, but very few solutions that are outside of hormones and surgery. And a lot of times, women in this 40 plus bracket find themselves staring down the barrel of a hysterectomy because their symptoms are really extreme. They're starting to call all of the shots in their life, and their doctor goes, we can put you on birth control, or we can give you this hormone to try to help with the hot flashes, or we could just take your uterus out because of the flash flood bleeding. And how many of you resonate with that? I was starting to be told before I was 35. I don't even know if I was even 33 because I was having cycle issues. They told me I was fast track for a hysterectomy by 35. No, sir. Do not take my uterus out. I do not want you to open the door for prolapse of my bladder, of my rectum, or anything else. Thank you very much. And a lot of us are not presented with any other options other than hormones and surgery. And neither provide us really great results because when we take our uterus out, it opens the door for different kinds of problems. I have seen people who have had hysterectomies who swear they're going through menopause for at least 10 to 12 years because the hot flashes control their life, their mood swings control their life, and they thought it was all going to be solved, quote unquote, by having a hysterectomy. And they just ended up inheriting a whole bag full of other symptoms that were equally as bad, if not worse. So, how can we get ahead of this so that we don't need hormones and we don't need surgery? How can we do that? We can do that by first and foremost making changes in the way that we move through the world. Learn how to work in a cyclical way. If that sounds like foreign language speak to you, that is totally fine because one of the things that is the greatest travesty in this country is a lack of education around women's health and what bodies are doing. So you are not alone, and I would highly recommend checking out my Body Wisdom membership because I take you through all of the phases of your cycle, what it is that it needs, how to feed your body during that phase or this time frame in your life or whatever. I take you through all of that. I provide you with recipes. I provide you with lifestyle solutions and workout routines and all that kind of stuff so that you can start becoming very intentional about how you live your life. Because when you're able to do that, you're going to reduce symptoms later on. Men go through this thing called andropause. They go through it later because men move in 8-year cycles. But some of the common questions that men in their andropausal transition start asking is things like, is this as good as it gets? Because they're starting consciously or unconsciously to come up against the fact that life is finite and they're at the best of their health that they're going to be in their life right around that time frame, and that there is a downhill slide from there. This is where we do see a lot of the midlife, the stereotypical anyway, midlife crisis types of presentation. For women, it's a little different. It's wanting to be more mindful of caring for themselves. There's a push for self-care. There's a push for boundaries. You start finding your voice and expressing that, which can be very jarring for people around you when, you're used to being like, "Okay, dear. Yep. All right." And then you stuff your emotions down inside of your body, which if you did not catch the episode about emotions, you should definitely go check those episodes out. The one where I talk with Dr. Emily Wilson about emotions in the pelvis and some of the reproductive and physical issues like vaginismus and things like that you can get when you stuff emotion down into your pelvis. And the other talking about how emotions are energy. Okay. So we start feeling like, "Crap, I've been low man on the totem pole. I haven't been taking care of myself. My body now feels like garbage as a result of it. I need to start advocating for myself." This is also the time frame that women start going, "Hey, I've put everybody else in my life ahead of me, and I wanna go back and get the degree that I never finished. I want to change my career. I want to travel. I want to do stuff and see things." And they start making plans with this outward look in their life. And so when we get to menopause, Chinese medicine has this beautiful way of articulating it as coming into second spring. It is this new chapter in your life where you, now that you're no longer a bleeding body, have a different level of vitality and you want to go after the things you want in life. And you tend to turn outward and become more externally facing. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think that it's important to know where perimenopause is taking you in this journey. And so starting to want to be a little more selfish about how you care for yourself, how you're spending your time, whether you're getting enough sleep, all of these kinds of things is the beginning of this transition if we're listening to the wisdom of our body. Our bodies are brilliant. They tell us everything that we need to know. We just have really been indoctrinated as a culture to valuing the pursuit of the mind over the wisdom of the body. And it's part of how we got here. But that's actually how a lot of my clients find me. Is they go, "I've been to the doctor said surgery or hormones, and it doesn't feel good to me." That's the key. It doesn't feel good to me. Do you have another option? And the answer is yes. I do have another option. I have very successfully been able to work with women who have been in this perimenopausal transition right around 40 years old. Their sleep is disrupted. They're starting to have hot flashes at night. Their periods are all over the map and get them right back into right relationship. It doesn't matter how many years you've been cycling. You can still come back to a standard healthy cycle. And then when you actually start making your menopausal transition, then it'll be very clear because you'll go through periods of time without a period and then one will show up and it won't be crazy town. It will just be lighter and a little less involved. And then it will disappear for a little while. Could be a couple of months, could be 4 months, could be 6 months. And then it'll reappear, but it'll be lighter and it'll be less involved and it will stop and it will go away. And once you have been a full 12 months with no menstruation, have crossed the threshold through menopause and you are now considered postmenopausal. You're on a journey in the perimenopausal time frame. Ladies, 35 is where it begins. And if you are past that, it's never too late. It just means you have to start now in making little changes to prepare your body for this transition. And you can completely make this transition in a very easeful way. But it all comes back to the power of pause. Being able to pause during your bleeding days, giving yourself punctuated pause during the day to break up your stress, being able to pause and advocate for yourself with boundaries around, "I am tired. I do not have the energy to do this thing today. Let me rest and I'll be able to do it with you tomorrow." But it requires you to be able to communicate with your family, with your partner, with those around you, to be able to pace yourself in a way that is meaningful. This is where the intentionality around cyclical living becomes more important than ever. You will be able to very easily manage your period symptoms if you are mindful about giving your body the right things at the right times during the month, not overspending your energy and working in alignment with the gifts each of these phases gives us. So if you are interested in more information about your phases, how to get started meaningfully taking care of these phases, please check out the link for Body Wisdom. It is a membership program that gives you all the tools that you need. There is new content released every month. It literally goes beyond this podcast. So if you've enjoyed some of the guests that I've had on this podcast, a lot of those familiar faces are going to be coming back for additional materials that will be in Body Wisdom. So please enroll. There's going to be new stuff all the time. I just realized that there's only so much that I can cover in a podcast episode. I really wanted to be able to give you a richer learning experience beyond these episodes. So that is what body wisdom is. I'm teaching you the wisdom that your body is communicating with you so that you can make transitions like this perimenopausal transition nice and smooth.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist, herbalist, sound healer, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment with Adrienne for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like us and follow Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.